All right, we're live. Hi, my name is Gabe Keith. I'm here with Ted Check and Tiger Taylor. We're going to talk about three of the biggest names in mixed martial arts right now who walked away from the sport for one reason or another in very starkly contrasting different ways. And so once again, myself, you can follow me at Twitter and at Gabriel Keith 5, and go check out our website, MMA-freak.com. You got Ted Check. You can follow him on Twitter as well, and Tiger Taylor as well. And that will be, if you want to look down in the bio section, I'll have it linked there. Also, I usually recommend people, if you really want to get in on discussions, Ted Check has more of an established YouTube following. Well, he has a YouTube following. And so that's always fun. I always go to his video to see what people are saying. So leave comments here or go there. It's all good fun for us. We just love talking about this. So to kick things off, I'm going to start with Anderson Silva. As everyone knows, he threw a leg kick. It was checked by Weidman, broke his leg. There's been a lot of talk about if he's going to come back or not. The middleweight division has now moved on to Chris Weidman defending his title against Vitor Belfort, and there's other contenders lining up as well. A couple quick notes before I pass it off to you guys. It was said that the doctor reported, that doctor that helped Silva cage side and then also went to the hospital with him, said that Silva was asking right away when he could fight again. He hasn't really said anything about if he's going to retire. Really nothing has been said. He's clearly just spending time with his family, going through the recovery process. At this point, we'll go first with you, Ted. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, guys, I have the blazer here, okay? I got it. I thought we were going to be ESPN. I don't know. But, no, for those of you, we were just talking about it beforehand. Everybody was going to wear blazers, except we weren't. And I only found that because my crap in the closet occupies like 1% of the closet, and my wife has the entire closet, so it's very easy to find what I own in the closet. But anyway, yeah, I mean it was a horrific break. I mean, as we call it, noodle leg. I mean it. I mean it was. I don't mean to make light of it. I broke my ankle about 6 years ago. Very similar to that. Not in that way. I didn't throw a kick at anybody. But I mean, it's a horrible break, and I mean, it took me months and months. I mean, it takes you a long time just to learn how to walk again. And to this day, I have metal that's in my ankle. I have a plate that's about that long, and then it has screws threaded through it. Now, I don't know if Anderson's going to get that. He's probably going to get a far better surgery than I did, because he's a multimillionaire. But I mean, you got to look at things like his age. I mean, he's almost 39. Also, at least one of his sons was quoted as saying he was hoping his dad would retire. Now, I don't know about the other children, but I mean, that's got to weigh on a fighter. He's a father. He probably considers himself a father first. So that, I'm sure he's taken that into consideration. However, as a longtime champ, I mean, that's just that's probably not the way you would want to go out. So to get back to your question, Gabe, I think we'll see him try to come back. I just don't know if his body will hold up. I guess I don't know. I mean, that seems like a kind of a non-committal answer, but I just don't know if his body's going to hold up. If they will allow him to, if a doctor will, if a state athletic commission will say, yes, you can. I mean, he's got to get through all that. So it's a lot to get through at an advanced age in the sport. So I think he's going to try. I think he'll try. I don't know if he's going to succeed.
That's a good point. Tiger, just kind of following up on that note, give us your thoughts, man, about you watched the fight too. What did you think? And then when he does come back, let's say, okay, we obviously don't know anything. Comment on if you think Anderson Silva's going to come back, and if he does, what do you think's going to happen? I gave you a lot to go off of, but have fun with that.
I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility for Anderson Silva to come back. We saw Corey Hill come back from this type of injury. However, what Ted was saying, Corey Hill's a lot younger than Anderson Silva. And when it happened, he was a lot younger. Anderson Silva's an age. Most guys are out of their prime by the time they're 36. That's really arguable. 36 is kind of that cutoff limit. He's almost 39, and he's been able to defy time for this long. If it wasn't this injury that stopped him, it was going to be an injury sometime down the road. Can he come back from an injury like this? Yes, I believe he can. Maybe not for mixed martial arts. I believe he might come back. This is his chance now to fight Roy Jones Jr. I believe when his leg gets strong enough, he'd still have his footwork. He's got great head movement to avoid the punches from Roy Jones Jr., and there's no kicks. There's no takedowns. Now, Corey Hill even recently stated in an article, since that leg break, people attack that leg. They shoot in on it. They kick that leg. They'll go for leg locks on that leg. If he doesn't do a mixed martial arts fight and he does that exhibition fight with Roy Jones Jr., he's got less to worry about, and he can finally end his legacy on the fight that he's always wanted.
That's a good point. You bring up a lot of good points. The one I liked a lot was talking about how this injury is going to work differently when you come back into a sport like mixed martial arts. Corey Hill's a great example as well. I mean, that's the other high-profile case of this happening, in the UFC that exists. It'll really be interesting to see what Anderson Silva does when he recovers. Will he take exhibition matches with Roy Jones Jr.? I don't know. That's interesting. I don't even know if that would be fun to watch. I mean, I don't even know what either guy would be, what their motivations for fighting each other would. I think it'd almost be like they'd be throwing jabs and hugging, because you only ever see them there for each other. You see Anderson Silva in the cage fighting Roy Jones Jr., waiting for it to be over and jumping around and then congratulating him or consoling him, what have you. It's real interesting. There's a couple other interesting plot points with this as well. If Anderson Silva does come back, where do you rank him? What do you think, Ted?
Well, I think once he lost, this most recent fight, UFC 168, he already dropped down, at least in the pound-for-pound rankings. I'd have to look at the official UFC rankings to see where he is in the middleweight division. But I mean, as you were saying, Gabe, at the beginning of this broadcast, there is a whole new crop of contenders in the middleweight division. There's a lot of young guns in the middleweight division. I mean, Vitor is there right now, but then we've got to think about if Weidman gets through Vitor, I would think Machida would probably be next. After that, maybe Jacare. And you know what I mean? There is a murderer's row of guys waiting to get their hands on Weidman. They all seem to be Brazilian too. I don't know what that is, but there's just that's a deep division now that. It's interesting when you have that. When you have a title change, it seems to occur that there's this the division. There's a lot of guys that now we're looking at saying, hey, yeah, he could be a contender. Oh, he could be a contender. So I don't know. I don't know what if Anderson were to come back. I mean, he'd have to have a couple of decent fights. He'd have to have, I think, at least two, and he'd have to, finish them decisively. I mean, yeah, he's the former champ, but by the time he comes back, man, that division is going to look totally different. I mean, Weidman might still be the champ, but other than that, there's going to be a lot of movement and a lot of fights that will have taken place in that middleweight division since his injury.
The one thing that really is interesting to me, and I think both of you guys have been a fan of the sport more than a few years longer than I have. And I've always wondered why it is that whenever you get such a dominant fighter, all of a sudden, and this is just my perspective, but all of a sudden it feels like people start saying the division is weak. Like you have, right now you have John Jones at light heavyweight. And before he was the champ, it seemed like you just couldn't get enough championship fighters competing at that level. The moment he starts wasting people, you start to feel, and I feel it too, that he's the only man in the division at times. And once again, this is just my perspective because I know a lot of people feel differently, but I feel like Anderson Silva has fought a lot of competition over the years, and the middleweight division, maybe it always has been competitive. It's just he's been so dominant that people forget that he's beating the best in the world. It's not just an empty division. So for him to come back, I think it'll be interesting to see if the UFC makes him climb the ladder again, or if like, let's say he comes back. If he doesn't, there's no plot point to continue on, a discussion like this. But if he does come back, is he going to still have that dynamic, like that he is near the top? What do you think, Tiger?
I think unquestionably he's still the greatest of all time. So when you're ranking him, I think you have to rank him as the all-time greatest mixed martial artist. But if you're ranking him in his weight class in the UFC, Ted said it best. I mean, they're on the road there. I mean, there are nothing but killers in that division right now. He's going to have to come back. I just don't know if he's got what it takes at 38, 39, 40 years old. These guys are hungry. They're younger. They're faster. They're stronger. As far as we know, Anderson Silva's not even taking TRT. So a lot of these guys are. And then you got Chris Weidman, who's just young, barely 30. He's coming into his prime around 32. I don't see him coming back and ever trying to take a UFC title again. I don't. I think Anderson Silva is the Junior Dos Santos at 185 now. What do you do with him? He could probably beat everybody else in the top 5, but he's not going to beat Weidman. Just like Junior Dos Santos arguably could beat everybody in the heavyweight except for Kane. So where does Anderson go now? He goes to these super fights, what we thought GSP left. He goes to these fights that could be interesting to set up. He sure won't be a gatekeeper, and that's for sure. And I think his second fight with Weidman was to come back to get Roy Jones Jr. until this fluke injury is probably going to halt that. But I think he will fight Roy Jones Jr., and I think it will be interesting. I don't think they'll hug it out as much because they're both really flashy. If you guys follow boxing and follow Roy Jones and how he fought and everything, he's going to be real flashy with head movement. They're going to have their hands down. They're going to almost make a carnival act out of a boxing match. They're both going to try to be slicker than each other and, slipping punches and putting on a real good show for the fans. And if they wear 12-ounce gloves, it could be really fun.
What do you guys think about what I said about the middleweight, like that idea that when Anderson was on top, everyone says that there's no one in the division? Because I know there's a fair argument there on the other side that says, no, it really is just a one-man show and there really wasn't much competition. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I remember, when Anderson was somewhere in his tenure as champion, people were saying things like, on message boards and what have you, oh, he's cleaned out the division. He's cleaned it out. There's nothing left for him. There's no one left. And you know what? I mean, I used to get angry at that. I'd be like, you can't clean out a division. There's always somebody there that can fight him. But you know what? I mean, but maybe there on the flip side, it seems to me like there's an ebb and a flow. You know what I mean? Maybe the level of competition that Anderson faced, maybe it just wasn't as great as it is right now. I don't know. You'd have to look at won-loss records and whatever. But I mean, he did fight some tough guys, and just off the top of my head, Vitor, Dan Henderson. He fought a lot. He fought some tough guys, and then some guys that weren't maybe as tough, I guess, is the best way to put it. I don't know. I guess it's kind of hard for me to say, really, but I'm not sure what his legacy is going to be. Because some people will say, well, he went 16-0, and other people will say kind of what I was just saying was that, well, maybe he could have fought tougher guys. He went outside and he fought, when he fought light heavyweight, he fought cans, or not necessarily, but I mean Forrest Griffin wasn't a can, but and maybe he just, I don't know, you can tell there's a bit of there's a war going on inside my brain here, because maybe he just made it look easy. Maybe that was it. I mean, the guy rarely ever got touched in a fight. Maybe he was just that great that he just made it all look easy and made everybody look foolish.
All right, I'm gonna move on, but feel free to jump back and wrap it up. I know, Tiger, you didn't really get like a final say on this. I'm going to move on to GSP. But feel free, Tiger, when I turn this over to you to wrap up your thoughts about the man, Anderson Silva. Let me just pull up GSP's profile. I like to kind of look at what it is. But I'll just kick it out. So, George St-Pierre won a controversial split decision and walked away from the sport, retired his belt. Now it's Johnny Hendricks, who a lot of people thought he won that fight, and a fair amount as well thought he, lost. Will be fighting Robbie Lawler. Tiger, you can either finish up with Anderson Silva or start off on George St-Pierre, whatever floats your boat.
I'll touch base on the Anderson, then I'll go right into George. With Anderson, I believe his legacy is intact. Fedor Emelianenko, for the longest time, people thought he was going to be the GOAT. He was going to be the greatest of all time. And once Anderson started making the run he made, Fedor's record started coming into question. People started questioning it. People started not thinking it was as great as it was. They questioned who he fought. You got Talis Lidis, you got Damian Maia, guys that Anderson kind of played with, that he kind of ran over. Didn't give him the most competition, but he wasn't facing guys like Weidman. Weidman took the belt from Anderson like Anderson took the belt from Rich Franklin. When he fought Rich Franklin was on top of the world. He was essentially cleaning out that division, and Anderson came in and just made a whirlwind of it. I believe there are some tougher competition right now with Jacare coming in, Vitor Belfort coming back into the picture. He looks better than ever. I think, his legacy is going to be great, but I just don't see him getting through that lineup. I mean, the lineup that Chris Weidman's going to have to face, I believe, is stronger than the competition that Anderson had to face. But it gets like that. Who's the greatest basketball player of all time? Is it Dr. J? Is it Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, LeBron James? Each generation gets younger, faster, stronger, better, more evolved. It's just evolution. So I believe we'll tell who the greatest martial artist is of all time. To move into the George St-Pierre thing, I think it's smart when a guy realizes that he's not what he once was and he's able to get out, go. He's still really young, especially for a fighter and an athlete. He started realizing that his skill levels were starting to decline. In his last 3 fights, he hasn't hit as many times as he has throughout his whole career. He went on the Joe Rogan Experience and was talking about alien abduction, time loss, all these telltale signs of brain damage, and was really worried about it. I believe it was his time to step away. It was his best decision. And he did what everybody wants to do. He walked out on a high note. Granted, his fight against Johnny Hendricks was super questionable, super close. You watch it one time, I think every time probably goes to Johnny Hendricks. But the judges saw it going for GSP that night. Walk away on that note, get your head checked, get healthy, and try to live the rest of your life. Nobody wants to see any of these fighters have brain damage in the long run. He's walking away. He sealed his legacy. He did not lose that belt again after Sarah. It was a smart time to walk away.
Those are some good points. I like how you kind of brought up how the state of the division has been like this before. Rich Franklin was on top before and apparently cleaned everyone out. And then, Anderson Silva, 2 fights deep in the UFC, just stole all his thunder. This might really backfire, but I almost, right when you were talking about that, I started thinking of like the Green Bay Packers, because for me, as like a Vikings fan, we don't ever have a quarterback. But the Green Bay Packers, these assholes, they go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and I just feel like the 185-pound, weight class. I'm not even a football fan, so I probably shouldn't even have attempted to go there. But it seems like the middleweights have just this. Now it looks like Weidman's gonna just clean everything out, and then so that was on that. I thought was really interesting, and feel free to to educate me on what I missed with my football analogy. But yeah, in GSP, man, it almost seemed like people, because you're not ever really afraid of a takedown. Like, takedowns are dangerous, but once it's like people just stopped being afraid of anything GSP would throw. I mean, when Nick Diaz fought him, he was just walking towards him, taking shots. And I mean, I remember I sparred against a guy that was scary, and he got in my head, and he wanted to prove that I wasn't even trying, and he would just stop, and I'd pull my punches before I'd hit him. And he'd be like, "You're not even trying." And it almost felt like even though, like Nick Diaz lost that fight definitively, it honestly felt that, like, he was not afraid at all. He was going to take no damage, and he was just going to get outpointed. And I think that mentality was his downfall. The moment people weren't afraid of being finished by him, I felt like he lost his allure a little bit, and he lost that championship edge, like that edge that you get for being the champion. Go ahead, Ted. What are your thoughts?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you look at GSP's record, after he won the belt back from Matsera, I don't think he's finished anybody. The opponents that he faced since he got the belt back, I don't think he's finished one person. And I think what happened, I mean, I'm just kind of putting this together, but I think maybe what happened was he discovered what the formula was for him to win, a formula that nobody at the time could beat. I mean, he basically transformed himself into a wrestler. I mean, he started off as a karate guy, and learned jiu-jitsu along the way, and then made the transition into a wrestling fighter. I mean, before he faced Josh Koscheck the first time, he made that bold prediction. He says, I'm going to take him down. And Koscheck's like, no, I'm All-American or whatever he was, national champion or whatever. He's not going to take me down. And lo and behold, he did, many times. So I think GSP just hit on that formula of here's what I know. What I'm an athlete. I'm an elite athlete, and armed with the tools of wrestling, I can beat anybody. But the double-edged sword, the downside was he wasn't finishing people, and so people took him to task for that. Hey, he's not a finisher anymore. The other thing is, with stepping away. The thing that hit me was when he said, I forget where I saw this, but he said that it got the pressure of being famous became too much. He said he had trouble with people approaching him on the street, and maybe to just shake his hand or get a photo or say, hey, good luck on the next fight. That just got to him, and I read his book. And in the first part of the book, he describes kind of this very Spartan, solitary existence of, going and training and then coming home and being alone, and then it happening all over again and over again and over again. But he seems to be a very quiet, reserved, private person. And then the last thing is, who knows what this thing is? We haven't really figured out, or no one's ever said, and he probably won't ever say, what this thing is that's causing him to step away. Is it like what Tiger's saying? Is he feeling some type of loss, in his brain? Is he feeling that something's going on up here? We had those rumors about the pregnant girlfriend and the his ailing father, and then the lawsuit. This former PR agent of his that's trying to allegedly bilk him out of millions. So who knows what it is, and how soon can he come to some closure on that and come back, if he ever will.
Yeah, it's so fascinating with George St-Pierre because you almost get caught up in that cycle of expecting him to be kind of invincible forever. I mean, he's the champ. He's supposed to carry this weight and shrug it off. We're all supposed to be able to criticize him. And I think it's interesting because he's a good guy, and that's the card that he plays up, but also that the UFC plays up. They always match him up against guys like Josh Koscheck and Nick Diaz, and even guys like Thiago Alves, who seems like a pretty nice guy, but all of a sudden is the guy that's going to beat him up. Even Dan Hardy, earned his title shot. Fairly legitimate, but the angle was just there, that perfect formula they always use with GSP. And I guess I'll kick it over to you now, Tiger. Comment on whatever you want about this. One thing that I'm curious about, I would like to kind of lead into, is if you could kind of bring us around on if you think GSP's coming back or not.
GSP coming back, I don't see what he has to prove. Why should he come back? Dana White's made it very clear he doesn't need to come back for the money. He doesn't owe anything to the fans. If it is a head injury, if he is having the time loss that he speaks of on the Joe Rogan Experience, if he's believing that he's being abducted by aliens, he needs help, and he needs to stop getting hit in the head. If he can avoid that and live his life normal and not want the fans to come up, maybe that's best for him. I personally would like to see him walk away. I want to watch every legend who was great at something go out in their prime, when they were the best. Granted, he was probably the best before he tore his ACL, because when he came back, the Condit fight was really hard for him. The Nick Diaz fight, he didn't look like GSP of old. The Hendricks fight, arguably, he lost. That's a whole other subject, but arguably. Going out on that, I don't see why he would come back. It's a new generation. Talk about Murderers Row, look at this. I mean, Robbie Lawler coming back. I mean, the guy was in the UFC when he was like 19 or 20, fought Nick Diaz way back in the day. He's coming back. He's made a resurgence. He's coming in and fighting for the belt next with Johnny Hendricks. There's just a new group of guys. And kind of GSP's generation is going out. I would not like to see him come back.
Yeah, it's a rough deal. It's a rough deal because, and you almost have to look inside a little bit too. I mean, not to get like philosophical or anything, but I was at UFC 168, and I think what was really interesting was how a lot of the crowd, the Vegas crowd, really felt that Anderson Silva was the hometown hero. They've just seen him fight there for the better part of the decade, and then you had a lot of Brazilians that flew in. And, the moment his leg breaks, that's it. You just immediately start referring to him as the past, and I think it's almost a testament to how prestigious that UFC belt is, and how much we should really respect these fighters and really cherish when they're been a champ for one fight or two fights, much less 12 or 16. And I think it's interesting. I think GSP. It's hard for me to see him walk away completely. I guess it depends on the state of the welterweight division for me. If Robbie Lawler and Johnny Hendricks duke it out and one guy wins but then loses the belt again, if there's a lot of money that can be made that's left on the table for someone to step back in, I think George St-Pierre might come back under ideal situations, especially if his issue is something that he can resolve. Like you were saying, Tiger, you brought up how he's on the and you had actually sent me that video of GSP on the Joe Rogan Experience, and I watched it and I was fascinated because it really does seem like he's got some stuff he's got to work out, and he's dealt with more pressure than most of us have ever, and so I have a lot of respect for that. But what do you think, Ted? What do you think? Do you think he comes back? And if so, what do you think he's got left?
Well, some thoughts here. I think every fighter probably thinks they have at least one more fight in them. That's at least the kind of the impression that I've gotten, covering the sport and talking with fighters. It's always, no, man, I got one more in me. That a true fighter always thinks that they're never done. And we've seen Dana White have he's had to retire fighters, like Chuck Liddell. He had to say, Chuck, you're done. You're done. I'm not giving you another fight. And Chuck Liddell, because he was so loyal to Dana White and the UFC, didn't go elsewhere. He probably could have if he really wanted to, but he didn't go elsewhere. And so he probably, Chuck Liddell thought he could fight on. But then we see what happens when fighters do fight on. Like you look at Gary Goodridge, who fought in the UFC. He fought. I can see you cringing there, Tiger. Yeah, he fought in the UFC. He fought in Pride, and then if you look at towards the end of his career, he was fighting in MMA and kickboxing simultaneously, or at the same time, and suffered TKOs or knockouts. His last 3 or 4 fights in MMA and his last 3 or 4 fights in kickboxing, and really is not doing well at all now. So yeah, going back to what Tiger was saying, yeah, it's awesome that a fighter can do that, can step away, that they can do it financially, and that they can do it, that they're settled, emotionally to do it. There's another guy that people often refer to, like, you go to the message boards, a guy named Philip Miller, who went 16-0. He fought in the UFC kind of back in the early days, 16-0, and walked away, undefeated, and is now, I think, a police officer. He may even be retired from that by now. But people often look to him like, hey, look at this guy. He had it. He had it all in his hands. He could have continued and possibly had the skills to go all the way and become a champ. And he's 16-0 and just walked away. And I don't think I don't know, but I don't know that Miller has any regrets about that, really. I mean, I believe he thinks he made the right decision. So, as far as GSP, who knows what he... I think it depends on what else he has going on in his life. Will he get into some other type of business? Will he start a family? Who knows? I think it depends on those other things going on in his life, whether he gets drawn back into MMA.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of factors that are going to have to kind of progress. There's a lot of there's a lot of it's just going to take time and to see what he's going to have to go through his stage and come back. It's always interesting because fighters a lot of times characterize their stages in life as journeys, and then I reach this point where this is what I want to do or that, and I could see GSP coming out and be like, you know what, the sport, I've sacrificed a lot, I've gained a lot, and I'm going to walk away, or even say, I still feel like I have something left. I have something left to prove, and I think that's fair. I think this is a good time to segue too into Nick Diaz. And for both of you guys, I think we're going to recap. I would like to kind of recap Anderson Silva GSP at the end, just because I feel like there's a lot of ways we can tie in all three of these fighters' careers, especially with the way they're all ending in 1 year, it seems. Nick Diaz, I became a real Nick Diaz fan, I think, when he fought Paul Daly for the Strikeforce belt. And I just thought it was really impressive how, everyone was saying Diaz's best chances were on the ground with Daly, and he chose to stand up and fight him. And I loved that moment where he kept, and I'm not the biggest Nick Diaz fan, so here I am, the biggest skeptic, watching Tiger smile because Tiger knows, but watching Nick Diaz go in, get dropped by Paul Daly, get up, get dropped again, get up, drop Paul Daly, and Daly doesn't get up. I mean, what a testament of, zero shits given. I mean, it was a fight. It was a fight. It wasn't a points battle. It didn't matter who was watching. He was going to fight it the way he wanted, and be damned if he was going to do anything but win the way he wanted. So, riding that win, he came into the sport with a lot of momentum, based off that win and also his record. And at UFC 137, he really picked apart BJ Penn, and then lost a split decision, unanimous decision loss to Carlos Condit, where he seemed to be kind of chasing down Condit a lot of times, and where Condit was landing the cleaner counter punches and the cleaner strikes, a lot of that I feel like the judges maybe misinterpreted what was going on, because Diaz was still chasing him down. He was still taking ground. And I thought it was a good strategy by both fighters, and I just thought it was an unfortunate scoring. It was just rough on the score. Then he fights George St-Pierre, loses another unanimous decision. Just his lack of wrestling outdid him in that one as well. And so he retires. He walks away from the sport. And he also, after, of course, the Condit loss, he had, marijuana in his system. I forgot what they call that, but, so he had been suspended. So a lot of controversy, a lot of close losses. I read an article recently by Chuck Mindenhall from MMAfighting.com, and he talked about how Nick Diaz could be the superstar that the UFC needs to kind of, usher them into 2014 off this year of momentum, but also loss with GSP and Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz leaving this past year. So, Tiger, let's go with you, man. Nick Diaz, what are your thoughts?
I got to say before I even start, I'm a huge Nick Diaz fan. I'm not on the bandwagon. I'm probably driving the bandwagon. So I'll try not to come off as the fanboy. Nick Diaz has had some really good wins outside the UFC. He seems to get it together outside the UFC. But when he comes in, the level of competition is just a little better than a Strikeforce, than an Elite XC, and etc. When he come in and he fights guys like BJ Penn, who at the time was on his way out anyways, he did a lot in that fight. He busted BJ Penn's face up, which has never been done in the UFC. BJ Penn's never shown damage in that fight. He had a lot of damage. And since then, he starts showing damage. Nick Diaz looked great in that fight. His fight against Condit was exactly what you said. It's like the judges threw out octagon control, aggression, threw out all those in the judging criteria and was just giving it to a better game plan in Condit. You know, counter-striking, backpedaling, 1 and 2s and outs. And he kind of just, his strategy was probably a little better than Nick Diaz, who puts his head down and just comes forward. I don't know what he has to come back for. In the 185 division, I don't know if his skill level overall is good enough to ever go for that belt. Or in the 170. I think he has interesting matchups and guys that he could fight, and absolutely he sells tickets. Any fight he's in, I want to see. I want to see him compete. So I believe there's room for him there. But I don't think he's ever going to make a title run. He's not going to get past somebody like Hendricks. He's not going to get past a Weidman or a Jacare. He's not going to. His skill level does not match up with their skill level. Even though his skill level is great, it's not that his is good. Theirs are great. And his lack of wrestling really hurts him. The lack of the motivation to even want to learn wrestling hurts him. GSP took him down at will. I mean, until the 4th round when GSP started getting tired, that's when he started not being able to take Nick Diaz down. Nick Diaz, it's his unorthodox boxing, incredible jiu-jitsu, and cardio for days. The triathlete. That's why he's so good. But if you get somebody who's going to take him down and get out of his guard, even half guard, and just starts working him from there or holds him down in dominant position, you can lay and pray Nick Diaz is what I'm trying to say. So I don't see a reason for him to come back. I don't see these matches that everybody wants to see. Other than, yeah, he'll sell tickets. Yeah, there are some interesting fights, but he'll never hold a title in the UFC.
Ted, what do you think? Do you think it comes back in 2014? I know Dana has said, no, there was some rumors, and then Dana said he offered a fight and he turned it down, and then Diaz's manager comes out and says, no fight was offered. There's always this fog of war if you kind of consider it something like that, where it's like you just don't know what's going to happen, and the facts aren't even straight.
Yeah, that's what I've learned about Nick Diaz over the years, is to expect the unexpected. You just never know what this cat's going to do. Whether he's gonna no-show a PR event or he says stuff like he doesn't have any money. He started up that MMA organization, but I haven't heard anything past their first show. Does that even exist anymore? Remember he started up some promotion.
Yeah.
He's an erratic individual. He's an individual. He dances to the beat of his own drummer, or whatever you want to call it. So that's what I've. Nothing surprises me with Nick Diaz anymore. He could come back tomorrow, and I'd be like, oh, okay, he's back. You know what I mean? That's it. But I'll tell you this. I used to hate the Diaz brothers. The flipping the bird and all that crap. And then I realized, the whole, Stockton thuggery and that whole thing. Then I'm like, you know what? This is MMA. It takes all kinds. It kind of dawned on me that there's a place for them in the sport. They help hype fights, and if you want to look at it in kind of a pro wrestling scenario, they wear the black hats. They're the heel, so to speak. Or maybe Nick Diaz is kind of the anti-hero. He's the guy that you root for even though you shouldn't. He's like the guys from ECW where they were all kind of rejects, but you love to root for him. you know, as far so he could come back and it wouldn't surprise me. And yeah, maybe he is the kind of the star power that is needed for the UFC now that they've lost GSP, now that they've lost Anderson Silva. He's the guy that out of those three, he's the guy that's most likely to come back. I mean, Anderson's injured. GSP, you know, just from all we just discussed, it doesn't look like he's coming back anytime soon. So maybe maybe the money will be right. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it has to be the money. I don't know, but something needs to draw him to MMA, and I don't know what it is. You know, because he's so unpredictable. I don't know what it will be, but yeah, it kind of seems as though the UFC needs that star power. I mean, they've got it in Chris Weidman, they've got it in John Jones, they've got it in Ronda Rousey, but there's room for another one there. You know, another guy to put asses in the seats.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like a lot of what I thought was dramatic about Nick Diaz and Nate Diaz is really embodied by their fans. I mean, their fans are very touchy a lot of times in the sense that they always feel that Nick Diaz and Nate Diaz are being disrespected. But, you know, I started to kind of get it when I started to really understand the difference between point fighting and people going into finish. And, like, there's nothing wrong with point fighting, but there is a certain extra element that of respect you almost want to give fighters that really don't give a shit, that just want to fight, because that's what you pay to see. You pay to see fights. So I started to kind of realize when I became more of a fan of the sport, even on a daily basis. I mean, every time you see like a really boring points fight, you think back to the fights that really didn't go that way. And I think that's what's kind of great about Anderson Silva, and I think that's what was great about George St-Pierre. And, you know, he gets pitted. He was getting a lot of, you know, George St-Pierre was like, you know, widely known as like the biggest draw the UFC had. And what I thought was interesting about that was that they always put brutal finishers against him. You know, they always put these guys that were putting people away against him. So it's almost like, is GSP the biggest draw, or is the matchups they were able to make with him that draw? And, you know, Tiger, you touched on it where you would love to see Nick Diaz compete, but you lose a certain level of intrigue, and you know, you end up carrying a little bit less when you know they're just never going to be able to climb the mountain again. Not to say that Nick Diaz couldn't come back and win in the welterweight division. I mean, there has been cases where fighters like Randy Couture and Mark Hunt recently, and you know, a myriad of others, where fighters that seemed older and more out of their prime and less capable came back and won the title. So, I mean, that would be amazing. But yeah, Tiger, take it away. And at this point, I just want to, you know, I think we can kind of mix and match. What do you think about 2014 for these big names that seem to have retired? What do you think is going to happen?
I think that money may motivate Nick to come back in 2014. I do believe we will see a fight between Roy Jones Jr. and Anderson Silva in 2014. I believe he'll come back for that. I don't believe Anderson has what it takes at this point with this injury. I don't know that he's going to be able to come back. And if he does, I'll go complete opposite of that statement. If he does, who's going to beat him besides Chris Weidman? Yeah, he will need, like Ted said earlier, he'll need 2 or 3 two-minute fights to get back into it. We'll need to see where he stands. But believe me, if he comes back, I don't know anyone else that's going to beat him. He's also got that Chuck Liddell, Mike Tyson aura to him. People are scared to death when they get in there against him. He has them mentally beat. People go in there and they're like, I'm going to give it my best, but I'm not going to beat him. He's got that aura to him. But I really just see him coming back, trying to do this Roy Jones fight. You know, Anderson is a big family man. His family's very important to him. If you remember when Anderson beat Chael Sonnen last time, the second time, you know, his son was in the ring, both of them, and they were bawling. There's like epic clips on that now, all across Sheerdog, for instance, of the sons just crying so hard. They don't like seeing their dad do that. They don't, and he won that fight. He won the fight in, you know, devastating fashion, and the kids were still that upset. I believe with his son reaching out, that will hinder Anderson coming back. I don't believe he definitely doesn't need the money. He's set up for life. He's got a gym in LA now, home in Brazil. He's got all the money he could ever imagine. He doesn't have a lot to come back for. And with his son begging him not to come back, I don't see him coming back to mixed martial arts. I do think GSP is done.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like how you approach the family angle too, because that's a side you really don't see a lot, because it's just not as exciting. But it's a very poignant part of these fighters' lives. And Tiger, I know you're a father too, and Ted, you're a father as well. What do you think, Ted, about the personal situations? And I guess I'm tying this in a little weird. Let me just open it back up and say, yeah, what do you think about these fighters going into 2014 and their chances of coming back or not?
Well, with Anderson Silva, and I just respectfully, Tiger, I just want to say, as far as the aura, I don't know. I think with the 2 fights against Weidman, I think that aura of invincibility has definitely been chipped away at, and I think that possibly if Anderson Silva does come back, I think you'll see fighters, who think that they can win against him. Hey, if Weidman did it, I can do it. Look at Weidman. And, Weidman is kind of, believe it or not, there are some people out there that consider both of those fights out-and-out flukes. Yeah, you can say the checked kick was kind of a strange thing that happened. But nevertheless, if he didn't check the kick, he'd be looking at a huge welt on his leg. And but anyway, Weidman's kind of looked at as kind of this everyman. He's a blue collar fighter. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily the fastest guy out there, not necessarily the strongest or the most skilled. He's kind of looked at and I'm sure he would tell you that too, that he's a blue-collar fighter. So I think that fighters think, hey, if Weidman can do it, I can do it. So if Anderson comes back, you'll see guys. I think Vitor thinks he can beat Anderson Silva. I bet you Jacare thinks he can beat Anderson Silva. So, we'll just have to wait and see. There's a lot of great matchups out there for Silva if he does in fact come back. Just looking at my notes here. Something that you said, Gabe, about Nick Diaz, never challenging for a title. I don't think that's going to stop, his fans, or I don't think that's going to affect his drawing power. Look at Chael Sonnen. That guy, I don't think he's ever going to challenge for a title again. I don't think he's ever going to. He'll definitely never win a title. I don't think he's going to even ever challenge for one. But that guy is one of the top draws. Why? Because he can sell a fight. People just love the guy. He's like a pro wrestler who can really fight. So I think Nick Diaz has that same command over his fans and his audience. And then finally with the Roy Jones Jr. fight, after Anderson Silva lost, you had Roy Jones Jr. saying he wanted to fight Nick Diaz. So I don't know who Roy Jones Jr. is going to fight. He just wants to fight an MMA fighter. It doesn't matter who it is. You know what I mean? It's like I don't get why he's doing that. Is he doing it because he's trying to revive his career? He seems to be. He's still getting boxing fights. Is he doing it because I know he has a close relationship with Dana White? But if you talk to Dana White says, I owe Roy Jones Jr. It's not that Roy Jones Jr. owes Dana White anything, but it seems as though Roy Jones Jr. is trying to do something to. Is he trying to elevate boxing? Because other than Mayweather, they can't really do too much, as far as big fights. I don't really know. I don't know where Roy Jones Jr. is coming from, other than he wants to fight any MMA fighter who wants to fight him. So I don't know who we'll see. Maybe I don't even know if Dana White's going to agree to it or not. He's still kind of on the fence about the whole thing. It seems.
Yeah, it's almost like it's almost like Dana hasn't figured out if this benefits him or not.
Right, exactly. I mean, because what would they have to do? They'd have to partner up with either like Bob Arum or Golden Boy, and the UFC is very picky about who they partner up with, and they always got to make sure that they get the best end of the deal, and that's going to just take some really. It's going to be tricky to negotiate with those guys because they're the same way,
Yeah, especially if there's co-promotion talks. You got two groups that just don't. They're just always used to running things their own way. It's hard to have that conversation. One thing you brought up, and I thought was really interesting, is about how Weidman checked the leg, broke the leg. I mean, one of our writers recently, Patrick Tite, wrote an article, and it's called "Weidman's Claim of Practicing a Move Capable of Breaking Silva's Leg is False." And he made a very strong argument about how Weidman just checked Silva's leg, and but it wasn't a move that is designed to break legs. This is an article that I would definitely publish on my site because it's very well written, very entertaining, and kind of offers a different perspective. But I wouldn't be able to write it because I honestly have no idea. So, Tiger, what do you think about is there a move? When Weidman's talk about a move that this move can hurt someone or break their leg, is that something he used, or did he simply just block the leg kick and then just kind of made it into a bigger deal?
It sure doesn't look like a move to break legs. It looks like exactly what happened. It looked like Anderson Silva threw a kick, and he just picked his leg up. It is what it is. He checked a kick, and it happened to break his leg. A lot of people are saying it's Anderson. It was poor form. Anderson obviously kicks really hard, and he didn't turn his hips over. He didn't commit to the kick. He was trying to get Weidman thinking with that kick. Weidman checked, and the shin broke. Now, keep in mind, why did Anderson not throw that kick with proper technique? You don't kick a wrestler. And the one thing where Weidman may not have the best boxing. He may not be the strongest. He may not be the fastest. He is a blue-collar type fighter, absolutely. But his wrestling credentials stand out, and they really, really stand out. You don't kick a wrestler. The minute you throw a kick and a wrestler times it, you're taken down immediately. Anderson, everyone knows his idea is to stand up. His game plan is to stand and outstrike Weidman. When he throws a kick, he's trying to get Weidman realizing that I got to watch this. I got to watch out for this. This guy's not afraid to kick at me, even though he's not throwing full technique. If he would have turned his hip into that kick, he opened himself up to a takedown. If he threw the kick the way he did, if it would have landed, it would have just told Chris Weidman, I got to watch out for kicks, even though technically he didn't. I believe it was bad form from Anderson and a perfectly just checked kick from Weidman.
All right. At this point, I'm going to start winding things down. But take a check. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to talk about that too. Can't help myself. The checked kick is not an offensive weapon, but I think they had Anderson Silva. I think Weidman's team, Matt Serra and Ray Longo in particular, because he is the striking coach. I think they had Anderson Silva scouted very well. Weidman and his team are so very intelligent. I think they had Anderson Silva scouted the first time, and they had him scouted the second time, as well as anyone could. For example, with the first fight, they know that Anderson likes to move his head very, very widely, boom, boom, back and forth like that. So Weidman flicks out this really silly-looking right, okay, and Anderson moves his head over right into this left hook. And then the second time around, now this is just I'm kind of speculating here. The second time around, they knew. They looked at Anderson Silva's kicks and they say, "Oh, look at the way he's kicking. He's not kicking with proper technique. So if you lift your knee up, bang. There's a possibility of a break." Because I think if I'm not mistaken, that Ray Longo had a phrase coined for that for checking it, and then call it the Devastator or something like that. Devastator.
Yeah.
Something like that. So that tells me that they had Anderson scouted, and they knew the way that he was kicking. And they said, okay, it's an if-then. If he kicks this way, then you do this. Yeah, it's not an offensive move, but it's one that was worked into the strategy and one that was planned. That's kind of the way I see it. You know, I mean, you're taking two small, thin bones versus one that looks like this. The knee is like a fist, you know. So that's what happened.
And I agree, because when you were talking about how he would like throw a strike out there and then just start throwing these looping hooks, his strategy, those didn't look like someone flailing punches wide. They looked like combinations, like you were saying. They looked planned, like part of his fight games. That's really interesting, and yeah, it gives Ray Longo and Matt Serra a lot of credit. I still, even though I understand Matt Serra's whole thing about, being like, yeah, we're the two guys that took down the two best in the world. It's like, yeah, but you took him, he got you back, But either way, I mean, I'll let him own that. I mean, that's still awesome. He took out.
Oh, you're talking about GSP.
Yeah.
Here's one final thing. I mean, really, I think Weidman's best weapon is his confidence. That above anything else, I would put that above his wrestling even. His confidence. He thoroughly, wholeheartedly believes he is the absolute best. I don't think there was ever a doubt in his mind that he would beat Anderson Silva. First time, second time. That's. I just wanted to say that. I think that's his absolute number one best weapon. The power of the mind.
I agree. That's what it was going to take. That's always what it was going to require someone to have to actually be able to step inside the cage and defeat Anderson Silva. I mean, a lot of fighters would just, I always love this picture of Yushin Okami. He's already knocked down. He's looking up at Silva, and Silva's walking towards him. And it's just his face in the scene. It's almost like this big animal has this wounded animal on the ground. And Weidman was never probably allowed himself to fall prey to that mindset and to that, to Anderson Silva's mystique and all that. So, so pretty much going to wrap it up here, but I say we should take a few minutes and just have you guys kind of wrap up your opinion of any of the fighters, anything you feel was left unsaid that should be reiterated or brought up. And we'll start with you, Tiger. And then when you're done, Tiger, tell people how you write for MMA Elite. You write for us at MMA-Freak.com. You're on Twitter at MMA Docket. Of course, I kind of did it for you, but take it away.
Well, I think you wrapped up the closing statement there for me. But, you can check out some articles I write on MMAElite.net. You can check out a lot of podcasts and articles I wrote for MMA-Freak.com. You can check out my podcast that I do on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at MMA Docket. The last thing I want to say about the Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman kick is, you're right, it is a defensive move, and the shin is inferior to a knee. But I don't think you could train for a special counter to a kick to break the leg. So that's interesting that people are reporting that. I just think that it's definitely was part of the game plan, though, because if you go back to their first fight, Anderson Silva never really hit Weidman in the face. He was leg kicking him like crazy, and he was landing that leg kick. That was the most talked about thing that Anderson did right the first time they met was, man, he just kept kicking his leg. He kept kicking his leg. I'm sure Ray Longo drilled and drilled and drilled that checking the kick. You've got to check the kick. And I think Anderson threw that kick, and he checked that kick, and it just unfortunately ended that way. But, will these stars come back? It's all speculation at this point. I believe GSP is gone for good. I believe it's for the best for him. I think
Looks like we lost Tiger.
Oh, man.
Right at the end, he was just leading the crescendo. That's rough.
We should hang out and see if he jumps back in.
Yeah, sounds good, for sure.
Oh, there he is. Look at him.
Awesome. Right back into it.
He's quick. He's a lot quicker than I ever was.
That's true. I
didn't want to say crashed, I mean, that was when my computer would crash. I got a new one for Christmas, but well, I see his picture there, but what does that mean, that he's trying to get back in?
Oh, there
he is. Hey, Tiger.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Welcome back.
I'm not quite sure what happened there, but yeah, I guess to wrap it up real quick, and if that happens again, but I think GSP's gone for good. I think this injury is really going to be telltale with Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz. I think Ted said it best. If the money's right, Nick will be back. I think that you hit that right on the head. He talks about his money. He talks about his tax issues. If the UFC, show me the money. Nick Diaz is saying, show me the money.
Got to buy the weed. Gotta have that bread to get the weed. Yeah, I was just gonna say real quick. Like Tiger was saying, we've been talking about it. It's pure speculation as far as these guys, Anderson Silva and GSP and Nick Diaz. I'm looking forward to this year. I'm looking forward to 2014. I'm not trying to be a shill for the UFC, but I'm just excited about what's to come. Rousey versus McMahon. John Jones versus Gus if they get past their other respective fights that they've got coming up, and then of course Hendricks and Lawler. I mean, so I think we've got a lot of great fights. There was a story that I read on one of the big sites where someone was lamenting that we don't have there's nothing huge. There's no big fight to look forward to. They're all big fights. I mean, in my mind, I get excited about it all. Will they do the pay-per-view buys that will they be able to match 2013? I don't know, but I'm just excited about this year.
Yeah, I agree, and I think even if 2014 isn't the year, it's just going to build to something better. There's a certain part of the process that's organic that you have to just trust and just wait for. It's like when you have your team. Like, let's say there is a rough couple years. I mean, 2012 was a rough year for the UFC with all the injuries, and that just was the story of the year. Like, all the injuries just ruined a lot of potential matchups and whatnot. But there's a certain amount. But through that, we enjoyed 2013 much more than we would have if we hadn't.
Yeah.
When you get a team like in football, like the Detroit Lions, where they lose the whole season and they lose every single game. And then you see that people are joyously getting the tattoo with the Lions. I saw one guy, he had the tattoo of the Lion insignia, and it said 0-15 or 16, however many games there are in a season. And it was just really awesome because that guy is going to bust that tattoo out when the Lions win a playoff game or something, and he's just going to be like, I was there, if they ever win the Super Bowl. And it's going to mean more for that guy. So I think there's a certain level of, there's, regardless if it's a good year or not, there's going to be big fights, and maybe we won't see the next Anderson Silva right away or the next GSP right away, but maybe we have them right now, and maybe they're building their own careers. There's a lot of stars that could become that in the future. So so I'll just wrap it up then. Follow Ted Check on Twitter at TEDCZECH.
You got
check. Gotta get don't forget the Z. You'll miss him. You'll run into some other guy that's more of a weirdo or
some
something.
Loser.
Some loser.
not this loser. Some other loser.
Then check out Tiger Taylor at MMA Docket. He's our senior podcasting personality. He's interviewed a lot of big names, got a lot of interesting dialogue, fun guy to talk to, friends with. And you can hit me up at Gabriel Keith 5 and at MMA Freakout. That's our official sites thing. Hit us up with any questions. Leave comments. Please leave comments. Let us know how we are doing. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. I might cry. I promise not to do it in front of you. So yeah, that's it, and we'll see you guys later.